Earlier this year, Florida Congresswoman Laurel introduced a bipartisan bill to combat growing cyber threats from the Chinese Communist Party. The legislation would establish an interagency task force to address Chinese cybersecurity threats. Congresswoman Laurel joins me right now, a member of the House Judiciary, Homeland Security, and Administration Committee. She's also a member of the Trump Assassination Attempt Task Force. Congresswoman, good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Look, I like your bill, and I know this is a major issue, but let's talk about the here and now. China is in the phones of some specific people right now, are they not? What are they collecting?
Yes, they are. And that's one thing that the FBI came out to tell us recently, is to acknowledge China has successfully infiltrated the personal phones, the personal information of a number of government officials. And what's more, we also know that as part of this action, they've infiltrated some of America's critical infrastructure. So we need to be concerned now about things like our electricity grid, critical infrastructure, water supply. They are clearly aggressively collecting information about American officials and about our infrastructure so that they have the capacity to hurt America if and when they choose to do that. So the purpose...
Yep, go ahead. What's the purpose?
The purpose of the legislation is to have the FBI and CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency over at DHS, really make an assessment of the scope and the nature, the depth of this damage and infiltration, and help us as Congress prepare a mitigation strategy. So they'll prepare a classified briefing for Congress every year to make sure that we understand where we are and how we can start with mitigation.
So what are they trying to do with that information, Congresswoman? What do they do when they record our conversations and take our data? What specifically are they looking for?
Well, you know, I think the possibilities here are really endless. When it comes to public figures, it can certainly be trying to understand the strategic motivations. What is the United States working on? What are we thinking about? What are our political leaders focused on? As far as everyday Americans, you've seen and covered extensively, there's a commercial application for this. There is a political disruption purpose for this. When they get to what are Americans thinking about, they can control what information we're seeing on TikTok, everything from our children to the types of things that are marketed to us to political divisions in the United States. They have been attempting to manipulate now for quite some time. And one of the more alarming aspects of this is the critical infrastructure and the efforts to basically make us vulnerable to them in some of the most fundamental ways. So we also need our private partners here. And I expect the FBI and CISA will be working closely with the telecommunication companies in particular and other aspects of our critical infrastructure to be sure that they're sharing with us the extent of the intrusion so that we can go about removing it, fixing it, and securing our networks and infrastructure going forward.
Unbelievable. Yeah, they really know how to undermine America, man. They've been doing it, and they've been raising the stakes every day. But let me ask you about domestic business. We're 11 days away from a potential government shutdown on December 20th. Speaker Johnson pushing for a continuing resolution, which would extend the deadline into early 2025. Congressional leaders agreeing on a nearly $900 billion defense bill. The House expected to vote on it this week. It includes 14.5% pay raises for junior enlisted troops. It puts limits on transgender-related medical care, DEI-based recruitment, teaching of critical race theory in military-run schools. It also features border security elements, like creating a northern border mission center. Congresswoman, are you expecting to vote for this?
Well, I think it's necessary that we pass the NDAA, and you know, while there's some really good things there with respect to the pay raise for our enlisted troops, we need to make sure. Congress has been hearing all year reports of our junior enlisted service members having to have government assistance, food stamps, basically to feed their families. So it's important for us to take a look at what is the pay for our junior enlisted members, make sure that they are getting that pay raise. But at the same time, we know that our armed forces have started to integrate things that simply aren't part of making them the most world-class fighting force in the world. You know, things like the DEI, things like programs that are just unnecessary and shouldn't be part of their core mission. So what we're hoping to do here is hit those essential needs, make sure that we are appropriately funding our military and our soldiers, but also look, where can we cut the waste and the abuse and the programs that simply don't belong? So I think we are expecting that to come up this week for a vote. And with respect to the remainder of government funding, yes, it looks like we're going to be seeing a CR. I don't think anybody is happy about another continuing resolution. But quite simply, we didn't get the funding bills done. We had a handful of Republicans that made that very difficult. We haven't passed those. Although the House passed a number of appropriation bills, we didn't get any of them back from the Senate, and they didn't all get across the finish line. So we are again faced with the choice of continuing resolution or government shutdown, just as President Trump is coming into office.
So let me get your take about the priorities at hand. Senate Republicans expected to push immediate legislation focusing on border security, energy production, and defense in the first 30 days of the new Congress, not taxes. House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Jason Smith says he wants taxes first. I spoke with Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty about this over the weekend. Here's what he said. Watch.
The tax bill is an incredibly high priority for us. If it's not fixed this year, it's going to be more than $4 trillion worth of incremental taxes added to the backs of Americans.
Does this mean you all are planning two different reconciliation packages? Why waste reconciliation on the border? Do you need it for the tax extension?
You definitely need it for the tax extensions, but there are legislative elements of what's going on at the border right now that we need to stop. So there are aspects of it that would all benefit from a reconciliation package, whether it's one or two. Again, my preference would be to do it all at one time as quickly as we possibly can.
So, Congresswoman, what do you think about this? You know, all of the advisors that I've spoken with of President Trump say this is still the main priority. Even Stephen Miller was with me yesterday saying, no, nobody is delaying tax extension. But the idea of doing two reconciliations for all of this, do you need the votes to have do you have the votes, or do you need a reconciliation for the for the border?
Well, I'll say this. Those are all important priorities, but I agree with Chairman Smith that I think that the tax issue is what we need to focus on first and very, very intentionally. And to be clear, this is what, the Biden-Harris administration worked very hard to cast this as tax cuts for billionaires, and that is simply not what this is. We've taken a look at how the expiration of those tax cuts would affect everyday Americans. The folks in my district would be hit with things like changes to the child tax credit, the small business deductions, things that would be very real and very significant tax increases for regular Americans across the board. So I believe we need to address the tax issue first. Also, there's a tremendous amount that President Trump can and I believe will do via executive order to make changes to the Biden administration border policies that he can do on day one that will make a tremendous difference. So certainly all of those things are priorities, but I believe we need to take those tax cuts and deal with those in the reconciliation process first and keep that focus.
Well, it doesn't look like that's where this is going, Congresswoman. We'll see, but I hear you. Tom Homan was with me yesterday as well, and he said, look, if you're illegal in this country, you have a problem. If you're a fugitive, you have a big problem. So, Congresswoman, he's getting ready to set that priority, and that's, I believe, what the American people voted for, secure the border, number one. We'll see when taxes come up, Congresswoman. Good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Great to see you, too.
All right, Laurel.